Alright, so Marvel Tokon is just over the horizon, and with the last reveal of the Knights of Doom team, that leaves just one team left to be announced, and that's Ghost Riders. Now soon we're going to be getting the final team announcement at EVO later this month, so I figured why not go ahead and put together a list, try and see if we can guess who will most likely be joining Ghost Riders team and finalize this roster. Now these first couple picks are picks that I'm pretty sure Marvel themselves might have leaked by accident, but they still might not be every single character that is I'm about to say. Now the main characters I'm talking about is Moon Knight, Blade, Clea, and Daredevil. Now obviously I just named 4 characters and there's only 3 that's going to make it into the game. Personally, I think we might see a variation of a couple of those characters inside of the team. Maybe some of them might be DLC, but the reason I even brought them up is if you go to the Marvel Comics Twitter page, they've put out a tweet detailing some of the comics that are going to be releasing around Marvel Tokon to try and detail the origins of the story for some of the characters and put people onto the world that is Marvel Tokon and what's been going on leading up to the story that's going to be taking place in the game. And if you go through the thread of all the comics they have there, the one that has Ghost Riders variant cover on it is Mark Spector Moon Knight #7. And if you've checked Mark Spector Moon Knight #7, you know the synopsis of that story is basically Moon Knight bringing his friends together to create his own variation of the Midnight Suns. And that variation includes Blade, Ghost Rider, Moon Knight, Clea, and Daredevil. Now that alone, with this being a comic that's tied to Marvel Tokon, should pretty much be like, yeah, we're most likely to get these characters on Ghost Rider's team, because why would that comic have that synopsis and also be linked to Marvel Tokon at the same time, if not for bringing those characters together? And I think that's most likely going to be the case, but I don't know if all of them are going to be there. Personally, I think we'll most likely see Moon Knight. I think we'll most likely see Blade. I think the 2 toss-ups are going to be Clea and Daredevil. Now, Moon Knight and Blade, I think, are 2 self-explanatory characters. Blade is a character that's been highly requested to be in a Marvel fighting game for years now at this point, so that shouldn't even be a surprise to anybody. And I do think Arc System would take this opportunity to put him in the game. I think he is kind of a very Arc System style character with the guns and the swords. They've already developed a character like that before, being like Hitman in DNF Duel. So I think they already have some experience with that type of archetype. Moon Knight's a very interesting case because I think he probably gained a lot more popularity because of Marvel Rivals. He was already a popular known character inside of like the comic and Marvel space. And even for people that cared enough to watch the Moon Knight TV show, they might have seen him or seen the name around, but I don't think people really know who Moon Knight was until Marvel Rivals, when people started actually playing the game and seeing the character more. So I could kind of see him making an appearance in this game, and he'd be a pretty interesting character. Seeing how Arc System would go about creating his character design, I think that'd be pretty cool, pretty interesting to see. Now, Clea and Daredevil are 2 interesting things. I'll start with Daredevil first because he's like the easiest. One, the last Born Again season just finished up. I think there's one more season, but for the most part, they just finished up with Daredevil Born Again. And on top of that, there's so many hints and Easter eggs in the New York stage hinting at Daredevil most likely being in this game at some point, from Josie's bar to Bullseye being in Fire Escape to Matt himself looking outside the window, Fogwell's gym. Like, there's so many Easter eggs of Daredevil making it inside of Tokon that it's kind of hard to not think he would make it into the game. Now, if I'm going off of the fact that Blade and Moon Knight most likely have a higher chance of making it, I think Daredevil is someone that might be DLC though, because one, he's a super popular character, but also there isn't really a female representative on this team for Ghost Rider, and the Knights of Doom team that got revealed doesn't really have a female rep either, so I'd assume they'd use this team with Ghost Rider to add another female rep, just at least one more female rep to round out the roster, which I wouldn't put it past them. They could even drop 2 if they really wanted to, but I see them maybe just dropping 1 more on this side of the roster, which is why I might lean a little bit more towards Clea. Now, the thing with Clea is there's been leaks before where we've seen a couple characters, names got leaked that did end up making it into the game, some did not, and we also saw stage leaks, and one of the stages that got leaked was the Sanctum Sanctorum stage. Now, if you know, that stage is mainly tied to Doctor Strange and the Sorcerer Supremes. The thing is, Clea is also a Sorcerer Supreme, and she is the wife of Doctor Strange. So it would make a lot of sense if instead of Doctor Strange being in the game, they actually went and used Clea as sort of the representative of the Sorcerer Supreme, that type of magical entity in the game, and take a slot. They could probably add Doctor Strange later on, but just to separate themselves even more from Marvel, you know, from Ultimate Marvel 3 and stuff like that, which they've been trying to do with a lot of these picks as is, Clea would definitely be a separate departure from Doctor Strange in Marvel, and she'd have her own magical move set that they could use to differentiate her from Strange. So I think it would be a pretty interesting pick for them to go for, and I wouldn't put it past them to use it. Now, 2 other characters that I'm gonna bring up because of the Sanctum Sanctorum stage and the whole Sorcerer Supreme thing is Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch. Now, Doctor Strange, I've already talked about, he's mainly linked to the Sanctum Sanctorum. He is the most well-known Sorcerer Supreme, so it would make sense for them to drop him in. But Wanda is also a Sorcerer Supreme in a variation of the comics, so it also would make sense for her to be here to kind of represent that in this stage as well. Now, the other thing on why I said Wanda as well is because when I was talking about those character leaks before, Wanda's name was also a name that popped up for those leaks alongside Magneto, and we've already seen Magneto make it in. And that, if that is the case, I'd be willing to bet that instead of Clea being on the team, like the initial draft I put out, they might swap her out for Scarlet Witch because she's a lot more well-known than Clea is in terms of like the broader audience, so people will be a lot more hyped for her. But again, the two of them really could interchange. I don't know, it's really a toss-up between whichever one they want to use, but I think either of those two are probably going to make it onto the team. So at this point, you're probably wondering who else could still be candidates to make it onto this roster with so many characters already laid out. And you'd be surprised with the hints we've gotten over past character trailers, there are still a couple more characters that we could talk about that have potential to be on this roster. For example, if you remember back during the Spider-Man team trailer, at the ending we saw some more paintings or little trinkets around the character portraits at the end that they usually do to hint at what's coming next. And we saw a couple of those little paintings around Ghost Rider's portrait, which led people to speculate 2 more characters. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is the marshmallow roasting over Daredevil's head. Now, that was a tease a lot of people took to mean Deadpool was probably going to make it into the game, because if you don't know, it's a very popular meme of Deadpool roasting marshmallows over Ghost Rider's head. Now, it wasn't Robbie Reyes' Ghost Rider that he did that on, but it's still a Ghost Rider nonetheless, and it's still a little joke or nod that they put into the trailer, which, you know, could be just for the, you know, the fun of it, or it could be a hint that Deadpool could actually make it onto the roster, which would be a pretty cool character pick. He would kind of clash with Blade, in my opinion, in terms of like moveset, you know, both of them having guns and swords. Obviously, they play completely different, but just the visual style of them, you know, of their weapons would be kind of a clash. I would say though, it is more of a push for Deadpool over Blade though, because the Blade theory is more so of a big fan push because people really want that character, but the marshmallow roasting is more concrete of like, this is the actual game acknowledging a meme of a character that could potentially make it be in Deadpool, you know what I'm saying? So Deadpool does have a little bit more credence, more so than Blade in that regard, so I could also see him making it onto the team as well. And plus, Arc System having Deadpool to work with in terms of moveset, that character would be super crazy in this game. Like I said, they've worked with characters with those type of moves before, or with those type of weapons before, so how they would go about it, especially with Deadpool's personality, I could see them doing some crazy fun stuff with that character. The next little tease that was in that picture with Ghost Rider as well was Rubber Duck. Now, the Rubber Duck led people to believe that it was Howard the Duck that might make it because, you know, they're ducks, so why not? But we already see Howard the Duck as a lobby avatar, and I personally don't think Howard would make it onto the base roster of this game as a character. But then I dug a little bit deeper and I went and saw that there's another character that is connected to Howard the Duck that was announced in one of his comics and is a pretty popular character, and that is Gwenpool. Now, Gwenpool would be a pretty interesting character because, like I said, it'd be another female rep for the game, and Gwenpool would be a pretty decent pick. A lot of people have been asking for her, and she's a pretty weird out there pick that you know, Arxis has been aiming for when it comes to these rosters. So I could see them going that route as well. Maybe if they chose her instead of Deadpool and save Deadpool for DLC, which is something I could see them doing because Deadpool is that popular of a character. Why would you not, you know, try and monetize it, you know? But Gwenpool's pretty interesting. Her comedic style character and the way she fights with her weapons be pretty like unique for them to put into the game. So I could definitely see that being a pick that they would go for on this roster as well. The other 2 characters I could see are characters that are more so connected to the Midnight Suns aspect. Now, I didn't want to super bring up Midnight Suns outside of like what I initially talked about earlier, because the Midnight Suns I talked about earlier actually involves Robbie Reyes. Robbie Reyes hasn't usually been tied to the Midnight Suns outside of the Midnight Suns video game, and that's its own universe. But in terms of like the comics and the Marvel universe, he hasn't really been tied to that team before until, you know, the Mark Spector comic that I mentioned earlier. So I didn't really want to bring it up super crazy, but there are 2 prominent Midnight Suns characters that I have been hearing people been clamoring for a lot when it comes to this game, and those 2 characters are Nika Minoru and Man-Thing. Now, Nico Minoru is a character that I could very much see making it onto the roster just because of the popularity of that character. I've been seeing a lot of people asking for her, especially, you know, when people had the Midnight Suns theories in the first place. She was one of the first characters that always kept getting brought up, so it makes sense if they listened and they wanted to do that. You know, there's been a lot of hints of magic being involved into this game. You know, even on the teaser that we seen at the end of the Spider-Man trailer, like I mentioned before, there was like some magic sparkles and a magic wand and stuff like that. So there's a lot of characters that could fit that magic description when it comes to Marvel. Nico Minoru is one of them, so it'd be pretty interesting to see if they could do that. And when it comes to Man-Thing is like another big body they could add to the game. We don't have a definitive grappler in the game yet, so maybe he could do that, you know, have some type of aspect where, I know one of his things is like, all who know fear burns at the touch of Man-Thing. I think using that type of aspect to make him like a pretty status effect oriented grappler, someone that could put statuses on characters or do something similar to that, would be a pretty cool aspect they could add to the character and make him that type of grappler, very interactive type style grappler. So it'd be pretty interesting to see how they would go about making that. Like I said, another big body, another character that's more of a weirdo, not really a humanoid type style character, so he'd be pretty out there, pretty unique pick for the roster I could see them making. So it'd be pretty interesting to see if they go that route as well. But I think at this point, those would probably be the last remaining 4 characters I could think of that could possibly make it onto this team. If you had to ask me, out of all the characters I named in this video, who do I personally think has the highest chance of making it, I could see the final 3 characters being Moon Knight. I feel like is a guarantee, most likely. It would be a toss-up between Blade and Deadpool, but I think ultimately they probably go Blade just because it's been so long since he's ever been in like a Marvel fighting game. So I feel like they would take this opportunity to use him and save Deadpool for DLC. Daredevil is another character where he has so many Easter eggs in his game. I feel like it's hard not to say he's gonna make it at some point, but unfortunately I think he's also gonna be DLC as well. And I think the final character to round out the 3 would either end up being Wanda or Clea, and I'm more tempted to lean towards Wanda just because of the leaks. Like I said, her being a lot more popular than Clea, and since they can go hand in hand, vice versa, in so many aspects, I think it'd make the most sense. So final team, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Ghost Rider, Blade, Moon Knight, and Scarlet Witch. That's personally the team I would think. But like I said, all the characters I named have a pretty decent chance of making it and have varieties of reasons of why they should. So you can let me know in the comment section down below who you think would personally make it onto the roster. And if there's anybody I didn't mention that you think has a high chance of making it, let me know that in the comment section down below as well. But with that, all that being said, that's going to be it from me. Hope you guys did enjoy the video as always. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. So, boy.